There is no universal definition of flash nonfiction. You might see, if you're looking on the internet, you might see calls for submissions for 6-word stories. You might also see flash defined as anything under 1,000 words. For the purpose of your assignment number 1, flash nonfiction is going to be 500 to 600 words. There are similar characteristics to a broad length, range of length within flash nonfiction. So that's what we're going to talk about. Some of the fundamental characteristics of flash nonfiction. You want to make sure you have a strong title. You don't have many words to make your piece work, and your title is an important component within that storytelling. Now, when I'm writing creative nonfiction, particularly short pieces, I do always labor the title, because the title can enhance meaning and theme. It can also kind of direct the reader in a certain way. So be aware of that. We want to start with a strong title. Now, instead of thinking big and trying to cram in the beginning, and then we develop the characters, and we develop the setting, and we develop the plot, and blah, 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 and we've got subplots, and then we finally finish, that's not going to work with a flash nonfiction piece. So as you go small, think smaller. Stay close, stay tight to the part of your story that you need to tell. And then it's also important that your ending pack a punch. Now be careful with this. It's easy to make an ending sound like the punchline of a joke, and that's not what you want. You want the ending to be satisfying in some way to the reader, and you want it to help give your reader the idea of what's going on in the story. Maybe the things that are not being told reinforce some of that, but you don't want it to sound like a punchline. Now, when we're dealing with memory, memory can be extremely fallible, and it can also be fleeting. And I think of this analogy. Memory can be like shining a dimming light through the darkness. It lands upon a scene and then it goes out. Yet we intuitively know that the scene is somehow meaningful. So I often find this when I'm writing in this genre. I'll try to grasp onto a memory, and I might have this beam of memory, but I can't remember what came just before, and I can't remember what came just after. So it is lacking those elements. Now, this is a great analogy for flash nonfiction, because we can focus on a particular moment within a story that encompasses more than we're actually telling. If you have a flash of memory charged with emotion, you can probably write flash. Consider an image object symbol that inextricably is bound to that memory, and then chip away at the excess detail, dialogue, and description. Rigoberto Gonzalez writes, "The form is a direction for the instance when a writer wants to highlight and celebrate a moment of awareness or awakening that will resonate for a lifetime." Your first assignment will be a flash piece of nonfiction that has setting as an important element of that story. So setting is often important in flash. This quote is by Brett Lott. "There is no better place from which to touch upon the matter of life and death through flash nonfiction than the familiar sacred places within one's own life, and to write in and of those places." So when you start to think about what you're going to write for your first assignment, be thinking about what stories do I have where setting is an important element of that story? Now, I will, next class on Wednesday, give you a writing prompt with setting in mind, and you might end up using that writing prompt for your assignment 1, but you don't have to. Narrative voice. The reader should sense the presence of the author, the eye that perceives, records, shapes, and amplifies. As you read through the stories I've assigned, you'll probably notice that you connect more with the stories that have stronger voices. That's because a strong voice can lead to a strong empathetic connection with the storyteller. Detail and meaning. Make every word rich in meaning. From one of the stories that I assigned, Undercurrent. I'm 27 feet tall, stretched across the yellow stubble of cropped stalks, and here's the creek where the bull ambled through one morning. These are important details. This writer is in a time of transition in her life. The season is also a transitional time. She is moving in her life. She's moving forward in her story at this particular moment. So these kinds of details are important. In one of the stories that you're going to read for Wednesday's class, Archipelago, I love this story. It has the most beautiful, specific details. I want you to pay attention to those details when you're reading it. Twisted chicken necks, voodooing them into dinner, and dinner is conjured, roast chicken, spinning like silver doubloons, and a fistful of silver coins buys paradise. Dolphin waves and dolphin head spouts. These are all these specific details this author uses. So a few things that you might want to think about when you're writing your flash piece. And I took these guidelines from David Gaffney's Sawn Off Tales. And these are all good pieces of advice. Start in the middle. You don't have time in this very short form to set scenes and build character. Don't use too many characters. You don't have time to describe your characters when you're writing ultra short. Even a name may not be useful in a microstory unless it conveys a lot of additional story information or saves you words elsewhere. Make sure the ending isn't at the end. In microfiction, there's a danger that much of the engagement with the story takes place when the reader has stopped reading. To avoid this, place the denouement in the middle of the story, allowing us time as the end of the text spins out to consider the situation along with the narrator. Now, this isn't absolutely necessary. Sometimes you can start in the middle, but there has to be a hint of what the end is. Oh yes, and I mentioned this earlier. Microstories can lean towards punchline based or pull back to reveal endings, which have a one-note, gag-a-minute feel. Watch that. There's this feeling like there's a drum roll and a cymbal crash, and you definitely don't want that. But you do want your ending to be meaningful. So you can avoid this by giving us almost all the information we need in the first few lines, using the next few paragraphs to take us on a journey below the surface. Make sure that you do sweat your title and make your last line ring like a bell. So the last line is not the ending. We had that somewhere in the middle probably, or it might come later, outside of the scope of the piece, and we've hinted at it. But the ending should leave the reader with something which will continue to sound after the story has finished. It should not complete the story, but rather take us into a new place, a place where we can continue to think about the ideas in the story and wonder what it all meant. A story that gives itself up in the last line is not a story. it isn't compelling. It doesn't leave the reader thinking about the story. Write long, then go short. Now, again, this is not a hard and fast rule. Some people are good at just writing short, but this is a suggestion. You can create a lump of stone from which you chip out your story sculpture. So if you are good at writing long, think about doing that and then chip away to make that piece of beautiful writing.